listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for spending some time with us as we sit here this evening just after the sun went down. Days are starting to get a little longer. The sun's spending a little more time in the sky, at least where we're at. So almost spring. Kind of enjoying that just a little bit. And I am being supervised this evening.
Yes, you are.
Closely. I should say, I neglected the other morning when we started this to mention the names, the titles of the books. And I was reminded of that. So, Tradition to Truth, One Man's Search for Honest Answers, God's Universe, God's Rules, and of course the last one, Inheriting Lies, which, let's be honest, it's in-depth, deep. If you're looking for some really in-depth forensic study that digs into words, that digs into culture, that digs into all kinds of things, that one's for you. If you like to keep it light and fluffy, of course, Tradition to Truth is, the light, fluffy. Won't make you feel good, but it's easier reading. Trust me. If you like what you hear, I'm chuckling because this is a podcast. You don't get to see the faces that are being made at me. We have fun here as well. As serious as it gets sometimes, we still have fun. If you like what you hear, those like buttons, share buttons, notification buttons, they all work. Make sure you push them. Thank you. Now, before I get really into what I want to talk about tonight, I need to clarify something I said the other morning. I said our job is not to build the kingdom of God, and that's true. He's perfectly capable of building it simply by speaking, right? Our job is to show people how to be subjects in his kingdom. And what that means is people who live in a kingdom are called subjects. It's because they subject themselves to the rules of the king. In other words, they follow the king's instructions and his rulings. Now, how can anybody teach someone else how to be a subject to the king of the universe if they're refusing to follow those instructions themselves? Well, so often, I hear from people, I want to build the kingdom. And it's mostly because they misinterpret the example we find in the prayer that Jesus taught when he said, your kingdom come. But then they miss the next line, your will be done. And of course, he's speaking to the Father, right? Now, the big problem, I should say, is the mistranslation that comes from Hebrew into Greek and then into English. And unfortunately, a lot of times when we take it from English, other languages are not translated directly from Hebrew or Greek. They're translated from English. That leads into other problems that we're not going to get into right now. The Hebrew, according to the Shem Tov manuscripts, reads, may your kingdom be blessed, not your kingdom come. Now, that could be a huge issue, right? May your kingdom be blessed, not, bring it on, but may where you inhabit be joyful. That's what that means. Your will be done in heaven and on earth. That changes just a little bit of the understanding of that, doesn't it? How can the Creator's will be accomplished on earth when so many people are not subjecting themselves to His will? You see where we're going with that, right? It can't happen for the people who reject His word. Too many false teachers have believed when they teach that the one who never changes decided to change. And we're going to talk about that more in just a little bit. And too many people run around claiming, well, all you need to do to get into heaven is believe in Jesus. But they forget about the Father who sent Him. They don't understand the message. They forget who Yeshua followed. They've actually created their own false religion, thinking that if they do nothing more than just believe, well, they can treat Jesus like some kind of divine fairy godmother. He'll give you whatever you want. And I've heard this time after time from people in other countries who talk to me and say, well, the missionaries said if we just believe in Jesus, our lives will get better. But they're getting worse. That's because they've taken the wrong message to those folks. Now, where is it found in the Bible that Jesus has to give us whatever we want? You find that one? You're doing good, because it may be in a future translation. We're going to talk about that in a minute. What we currently have in John 14:13 does read, and I will do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. I'll do whatever you ask. Isn't that interesting? Unfortunately, that verse doesn't stand by itself. It follows, truly I tell you, whoever believes in me and does the works that I am doing, he will do even greater things than these. See, he's not talking about whatever you want. He's talking about doing the will of the Father. Big difference there, right? Huge difference. And it really, it kind of irritates me sometimes when I have people ask, well, why didn't God do this for me? Why didn't God do that for me? Well, number one, are you living the way He designed you to live? And number two, is what you asked for what He wants you to have? You see, another way to think about what Yeshua was saying is He's showing people how to be a subject in the kingdom. He's showing people how they themselves should subject themselves to the will of the Father and not really be overly concerned for the grammar police. You don't be overly concerned with the rules of man. And that actually brings me into tonight's topic, because there is currently underway a movement that is rewriting certain classic books to make them more, I'm going to say, culture friendly. Now, Dr. Seuss is a good example. Children's books, they're easy to rewrite. It's been done hundreds of times. If you look at Grimm's fairy tales, it's in the United States, it's far different than the European version. They want them to be more culture friendly. But, it kind of falls under the umbrella of we want them to be more modern. Many of the books that were considered classics are being, well, I'll say updated in air quotes, for lack of a better term. Pride and Prejudice, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. They're just some of these other books that are being rewritten. But, of course, I'm going to talk about the book that's being rewritten, and it has been rewritten over and over, and it should never change, and that is the Bible. Now, if you carefully review some of the Bibles written in English, you're going to see that some of the translations are missing some things. Some translations have added some things. Pretty important things sometimes, too. The NIV, the non-inspired version, as I call it, it's missing several verses, and worse yet, there's verses there that have been added. Some have been severely mistranslated, although I will say that in a couple of instances, I have found a couple of verses that are actually more direct and to the point than many others. But that, do those couple make up for what's been added or what's been taken away? No, they don't. Several years ago, I attended a rededication ceremony for a church. The speaker there, and I've told this story before, so I'm not going to get into it because it irritates me every time I think about it, but I have to say this. The speaker said, well, there's just some verses that we need to be, we need to take them out of the Bible. They just don't fit anymore. Isn't that interesting? Of course, that is in direct conflict with what we read in Deuteronomy 4:2 and 12:32 that warns us not to add to or subtract anything from the sacred word of our Creator. Now, here is someone who is a seminary graduate. This person was in a position of authority in the political outline of the church. And they're saying, well, there's just some things that ought to be taken out. It just doesn't fit in our modern times. The main reason people have a desire to rewrite the Bible, it's actually an attempt to change who the Creator is. And it's attempting to force him into accepting sin. That's what it is. That's all it is. It's that simple. It doesn't matter if we're talking about human sexuality. It doesn't matter if we're talking about false testimony, stealing, adultery, whatever your favorite sin might be. Doesn't matter what it is. Malachi 3:6, as many of you know, my favorite verse in the Bible. I am Jehovah, I do not change. Therefore, you are not destroyed, the sons of Jacob. And all those who join with them. Everybody who proclaims that the God of Abraham is their God. The Creator of the universe is their God. Now, that should be pretty easy, fairly easy concept to understand. God doesn't change. It's for our benefit that he doesn't change. How's that even come into question? Whatever happened to he is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow? Whatever happened to that? Is that something that needs to be taken out because it just doesn't suit us anymore? We have a lot of things going on in this world that the Almighty doesn't agree with. I think we can agree with that. But should he change just because we don't like the way he wants things done? Does a craftsman ask a table, are you good enough? Or should I make the legs just a quarter of an inch shorter? Maybe to be more biblical, I say, does the potter ask the clay what it wants to be? And that must have struck a nerve because somebody's shaking their head. Yes. Are you saying the potter does ask the clay or no? Oh, it does?
Sometimes.
Sometimes?
when they can't decide what they want to make.
I don't think God has that problem.
No.
Now, we have people not only suggesting that he changes to suit our will, some people insist on it. Oh, you've just got to change to do this. Wouldn't it? I just think you should do. Now, is that seeking counsel or giving advice? I could go down a long rabbit trail on that one, but I won't. You see, what it leads to is people attempt to manipulate the sacred word of our Creator and claim inconsistencies in the Bible. And they use that as an excuse to edit the portions they don't like either into or out of the Bible. They change them around. They switch them up and back and forth. They play with words. They try to modernize and update. Well, you can modernize and update as long as the definitions are the same. But the problem is they're not always the same. When I wrote God's Universe, God's Rules, I wrote in there that there are no inconsistencies in the Bible. Anything that seems to contradict itself in the Bible is our misunderstanding. The contradiction belongs to us. And that's true. Because if there were inconsistencies and contradictions in the Bible, well, it could not be the sacred word of the Creator. It would be nothing more than, just a nice book of literature. I really don't think that's what the Bible is. I think it's there to give us good, true, proper instruction. Now, some people who listen regularly may try to argue with me that, the sacred name Bibles, they're the most accurate. I hate to say this, there's some problems in some of them too. They attempt to push their agenda so hard that they actually use names where they shouldn't. They don't usually add anything, but they do switch some things around sometimes. And that's kind of a shame because it does cause confusion for the unsuspecting reader. It really does. One particular translation that I won't mention because I don't use it very often. I don't even have a copy of that one. Uses the word Yehovah where it shouldn't be used because they have Abraham speaking in such a way that it would make him less respectful to the Almighty. Now, recently I've actually been involved with a conversation about when the written alphabet was introduced. And in looking over some passages concerning that, I noted that there are words that are typically translated as to speak or to utter or to say, or even word. The word for, there's several, I shouldn't say several, there's a few different Hebraic expressions for the word. And depending on how it's used in the context, it shouldn't always be translated as word. Sometimes it should be translated as, he wrote this down. But I guess that was, too easy, right? Now, the problem is in the confusion because when somebody is attempting to pinpoint a certain event in a biblical timeline, such as when was the written language given to us and used, there's no definitive translation currently that would stand up to any critical course of study in that. And that's kind of sad because there are people who don't speak or read or have a working knowledge of Hebrew that can go back and look at these things and say, this doesn't fit here. This should have been translated differently. so for the person who doesn't speak the original language, or at least have a working knowledge of the original language, and they know how to look these things up and have the access to the reference material for it, they're stuck. And that's kind of sad, isn't it? Somebody who wants to know, who has a desire to learn, and all of a sudden they find themselves going, well, this is all I have. A little bit of a problem there, isn't it? The Bible doesn't need to be rewritten. It's perfectly fine. Even a lot of the translations we have, it needs to be re-understood. But it needs to be re-understood the way that the people that it was written directly to would have understood it. Now that means that you should have some kind of a way to read it, and I don't want to say decipher because it's not a code. I don't want to say interpret because that's wrong as well, but you should be able to look at it, and when you read a passage, oh, that's a figure of speech. Or, oh, this is a narrative, it's telling a story. Or, this is a conversation. This is a monologue. Identify who's speaking and what they're speaking about. Oh, wait, we can do that in any translation, in any language. Because it often says, God said to, or, Joseph said to Mary. It says these things. It's there for us if we will re-understand it. When we see passages that tell us some animals are not fit for food, or man shouldn't have sexual relations with another man, or women with women, we attempt to change or discredit the sacred words of the Creator. Just because we don't like something or we don't agree with something, does that mean it's not God's word? Of course not. We don't have to like what he says. We just have to do what he says. And I need to say this. These instructions we have in the Bible are for those who choose to consider the God of Abraham as their God. The ultimate supreme ruler of all, right? And those who choose him will subject themselves to his will and his words. Those who reject him will not. And I know a lot of people who call themselves, oh, I'm a believer. But they're not doing the things that believers should be doing, or they're doing things believers shouldn't be doing. Maybe it's a good time to review just a few of his instructions. Go ahead and read that passage if you would.
And God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make yourself an idol in the form of anything in the heavens above, or in the earth below, or in the waters beneath. You shall not bow down to them who worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on their children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing loving devotion to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the Lord your God. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not leave anyone unpunished who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God, on which you must not do any work. Neither you, nor your son, or daughter, nor your manservant, or maidservant, or livestock, nor the foreigner in your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them. But on the seventh day he rested. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. Honor your father and mother, so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his manservant or maidservant, or his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Exodus 20, 1 through 17.
Now, I hope that sounds familiar to you. Okay? And while a lot of people will admit, these things shouldn't be rewritten, they shouldn't be taken out, they shouldn't be changed because these are the words of God. Well, let me ask you this, folks. Isn't Leviticus 11 also the sacred word of the Creator as well? What about Leviticus 18? Well, for that matter, what about Genesis chapter 1? If we don't believe creation as it's written, why should we believe any of it? If you don't believe Genesis 1:1, why should you believe Exodus 20:17? Uh-oh. I just heard somebody gasp. Right through the microphone. I heard it. It becomes very easy to advocate for change when we don't believe what is written. Oh, we don't need that. It doesn't count anymore. Those things were for those people at that time. Well, if Genesis chapter 1 was written for those people at that time, when are we living? Are we living 100,000 Earths in the future? How many times has it been recreated? Think about that. If you don't believe Genesis chapter 1, why believe Exodus? I'm not going to count those up there. Why would you believe don't murder? If you don't believe Genesis chapter 1, is it okay then to commit adultery? Have you ever thought about that? Either the Creator is your God or you're bowing down to something else. It comes down to that. It's that simple. And the reality is the choice is yours. Now, I'm reasonably certain. I think I can say this safely. The Creator sees absolutely no difference between parting the Red Sea, the birth of a child, or someone recovering from an illness. For him, miracles are miracles. He can do them all day long. Doesn't matter if they're big, doesn't matter if they're small. We've talked about that, right? But the reality is they can be miraculous things or they can be nothing more than everyday occurrences for us. It kind of depends on where you put your faith. Right? Think about that. How many, around the world, millions of children are born every day, maybe? I don't know if it's that high or not. I have no idea. I did not look that up. It just came off the top of my head. But, even if it was in the hundreds of thousands, is that just an everyday occurrence now? Or is it truly the miracle of life? But we have diminished that miracle of life to nothing more than an everyday occurrence. It all depends on where you put your faith. So let me ask you this. What part of the Bible do you want to do away with? What part of the Bible do you want to do away with if you had to rewrite it? What would you change? And don't say, it doesn't count if you say, I want to change some of the names that are really hard to pronounce. That doesn't count, all right? So what part of the Bible do you want to change? What part of the Bible do you want to do away with? I can hear them gasping right through the microphone. They're out there going, "What do you mean?" Because I'm going to give you a clue here. The part of the Bible you might want to change, the part of the Bible you might want to do away with, will indicate what your favorite sin is. All right? Do I need to say that again? The part of the Bible you want to change or do away with will indicate what your favorite sin is. I'm going to let you think on that and stew on that, fret on that, pray about that, I hope. And I'm going to say, now, go and re-understand your Bible. Was that a good way to... Okay. And we will be back with you on Monday. Is there anything that we need to let them know before we...
Not that I know of.
Not that I know of. I don't think of anything. I can't think of anything either.
Everyone be blessed.
Absolutely. Until Monday, many, many blessings, everyone.